Yay, Busboys and Poets. That's so exciting. And let me add another two exciting things. We've got two more Busboys and Poets coming, one in April in Baltimore, and the other one towards the latter part of summer in Columbia. So Busboys is continuing to spread its message, spread its love and concern for the world. My name is Carol Rhodes Dyson, and I am gifted to be a part of the Busboys and Poets family. I'm the curator. I've been the curator since 2013. We were talking about that a little earlier. And it's my pleasure this evening. I continue to try to scour the communities. You know, we have a large community, Baltimore, Virginia, DC, to connect with people that are creative and create the creative folk and that are doing wonderful things here in this community. And this evening, I have with us tonight Amy Lokoff, who is a creative economy catalyst based here in Washington, D.C. Let me share a little bit with you about Amy. She as a creative economy catalyst, she uses her work to explore inclusive community building, art visibility and accessibility, and financial sustainability for creatives. Over the past 10 years, she's worked with hundreds of visual artists, visual and performing artists, and held positions in a variety of arts organizations and small businesses, including Anacostia Arts Center, On Floor Gallery, Shop Made in DC, Pyramid Atlantic Arts Center, and Transformer. Amy has also organized events and exhibitions as an independent curator and supported numerous do-it-yourself art installations as a consultant and arts administrator. Most recently, at the end of 2005, she organized the first ever Kennedy Center Holiday Market, which featured over 40 small local businesses over 4 weekends. Her exhibitions and events have been covered in the Washington Post, the Washingtonian, DCist, 730 DC, East and East City Art. We have the information so that you can follow her contact information, so that you can keep up with all these exciting and interesting activities that Amy is a part of and organizes. So welcome, Amy. So you heard us say all these wonderful things about you, right?
Yeah, no, I'm sitting here blushing. And I wrote that thing.
That's good. We were beginning to talk, and it was talking about what brought you here from Philadelphia, because recognizing you came from Philly. So why don't you tell us a little bit what brought you here, and then I guess we'll go into showing these images, because I know we want to talk about the things that you've done. But as I say, share with us you coming to this area and what some of your experiences.
So I moved to DC in August 2008 to attend American University as undergrad, and so I'm coming up this summer on 13 years of living here, which baffles me because, as many of you might know, that American University is definitely attracts a certain subset of young adults, people who are extremely politically active and super aware. And at the time of my arrival, I was not quite that way. I was liberal, I knew, but I didn't really follow the news and I didn't really know that much. But so I was one of the weirdos that actually studied art and education there. And yeah, I got involved in, so I didn't necessarily arrive in DC with a love affair of the city and the Capitol building and all of these things that so many people do. But I fell in love with DC, I would say, kind of towards the end of my career at American, when I started to get more involved in the community here. And the first had a lot of different like smaller things working with different artists. One of the first that was really influential though was I worked with Provisions Library, which is now based at George Mason University. And I think they were still sort of in the transition period.
What was Provisions Library? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, they're the best. Don Russell's the best. I highly recommend all the things. They are like a super tiny arts organization that cares about social action, social justice. And they are a physical, very tiny library that is now based, like I said, at George Mason. And so when I was there, at least, they hosted a couple different residency programs and brought in artists from different parts of the country and basically helped them do research for social action projects that they were working on. And so it really made the people that I met, like, they weren't just like painters, like they were, the type of work that they were making was incredibly diverse. And we went all over the city with them, to make sure that they would get the full experience while they were here. And that just that was like one of the very first things where it like kind of blew my mind about how being an artist could be, and how the arts community could be.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes people ask me, well, why do you have all these curators on? And I guess too, because I'm a curator, I really like the conversation because we talk about multiple artists. We talk about trends and things. Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful to talk about the artists and to experience their creativity. And it's also interesting as curators, as people working in the arts, how we kind of bring things together to share so other people can kind of see our viewpoint, see what we see and experience what we see. And those are important things as well. So I really appreciate what you just said in terms of the Provisions Library and how you started there and, sharing, because I'm familiar with Don Russell, but and George Mason, but I didn't know about Provisions, and it sounds like a wonderful thing. But you were saying after Provisions, you did what?
So after that, I graduated from American University. Kind of like those sort of things overlapped a bit, and I got a job working for the DC Public Library and working at the Anacostia Art Center. So I was doing 20 hours in each place, and it was like, what's interesting to me is that I feel like when I look back at my younger self, it was like I had a sense then what I wanted to do. I just didn't have the words to articulate it. And I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to whatever it is. I'm not exactly sure. But so I was instantly went from really never spending any time in Ward 8 to being there at least 40 hours a week, if not much more. And just learning like Chocolate City, DC, not the DC that I knew going to American University. So I met so many more Native Washingtonians and artists that were, had lived here their whole lives, and also just community members. And I got like a kind of crash course in a lot of things really quickly. And that kind of foundation, I guess, is like kind of what is the reason I'm still here now. Because I was like, there is a lot going on here and it is interesting. And there is this, like, I don't know, there was just all of these struggles going on between around race, around, who's arriving, who's staying, who's leaving in the city. And yeah, I don't know, it seemed important to be involved. And I also just realized the value of like the interconnection between the art world and the community where these things take place. Like,
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You can't leave that at the door. You can't leave, you meet the community, as you go into the museum, or the gallery or the art space, there's a community outside, and you can't really separate it, or you shouldn't really separate it. I think that is to me an important key. But you said back in the early days that you were formulating your mission and your purpose, and that you kind of come up with it. So you call yourself a creative economy catalyst. So I gather that's how you began to develop that. And so why don't you explain a little bit about what you mean specifically? And, I guess your images tell a little bit more of the story, and maybe this is when we enter them, but perhaps you want to share a little bit before we go into the slides.
Yeah, well, I can explain where that term comes from. So, like, long story short, I ended up working at the Anacostia Art Center for many years. And sort of towards the end of my time there, I was, I knew that I was starting to be ready for the next thing. And I was trying to figure out what that was and who I wanted to be next, because I was helping to program like multiple spaces. And I had been involved in all these different types of form of art and been around small businesses. So I've been programming art shows, working with small businesses. There's also a black box theater in that space. So also just like being involved in all of the different amazing things that came in and out of that space. And I was trying to like piece together what it was that all of that experience meant. And I knew that I wanted to curate more. I obviously was doing it at work, but I wanted to sort of like have a little bit more ownership. But I knew that wasn't going to be the only thing. So it didn't seem like saying that I was a curator felt like enough. And I credit Benga Ogunjimi for helping me with this. He has a business called Go Global, or Go. I should have looked up his business name but I will put his name in the chat at some point. But he has a professional coaching business, and actually just put out a documentary on Amazon about all the amazing people he's coached. But yeah, so he and I kind of like went back and forth to try to figure it out together. And that was what we arrived at, because basically the connection between art and business and politics and all feel interconnected. And so anything that you do, like if I'm curating an exhibition, there are so many other parts to it besides just the art and like the aesthetics. So this was my sort of attempt to address it before I had really even programmed anything on my own, which was sort of interesting because there's a lot of things that came after that very much like match sort of what my like very foggy vision was.
Well, I'm glad you're able to share that information. I'd really like to. The gentleman's name was
I'm gonna put it in the chat because I don't even know if I can do it in the chat.
Yeah, well, not right, but I know you're going to send this information later on it. So because that would be good reference. So I know you put together some images to share a little bit about what your background. So we probably want to take a look at those, and you tell us about that. Tell us about the images as we go along. Okay. We know this is you. Yeah,
that's me with my self haircut that I gave myself in August. Okay, so this is just a few like random images that I pulled together from the Art Center. In the top left corner, you will see the sort of 3 people that kind of really created my world and my experience while I was at the Art Center. So there's me first with long hair and glasses.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah, that's me on the left. Yeah. And then the woman next to me in red is Kate Taylor Davis, and she was my first like full-time boss. And I still am very good friends with her and still talk to her. I just saw her like 2 days ago. And her leadership was incredibly influential to me and to sort of like a lot of the ways that I have chosen to do things after, just like from modeling from her. And then next to her is Camille Kashaka. who now is the executive director at Motor House in Baltimore.
Oh, really?
And doing lots of amazing programming and things.
Okay.
And next to her is Terence Nicholson.
Yeah.
Sub-Zero.
The man.
Terence is a musician and an artist, and we worked together and does martial arts. He does everything.
He does everything.
And he and I worked together very closely for a long time because basically he hung the work and I did all the admin for the exhibitions. So the two of us needed to rely on one another pretty closely. And also just, I think the way that he lived his life in sort of all of these different spheres, like these different creative spheres, was also just like really eye-opening. And he's also a native Washingtonian, so we could talk about DC stuff all the time. And then, the other photos are on the right. You can see one of the businesses, Vintage and Charmed. There's performance and an artist talk from How We Lost DC.
Yes, I'm trying to say we have Keely Ron Anderson down there. Who is some of the on the panel? I know it's a little.
I'm not going to remember everyone's name off the top of my head, I think. But Amber Robles Gordon, Shantae Gates is not actually in that photo.
Okay.
You can't see.
I don't mean to cause you stress.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna I think on the spot, I'm not gonna remember everyone's name. But Larry Cook. That's
okay.
That's the artist on the left.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway.
Very prominent community artist.
Anyway, just a group of really incredible artists who did this exhibit about sort of changing DC, and it was really powerful and also just like really impactful for me. You can go to the next slide. More photos. Not gonna get into any of them, but
I know it's a
great space.
Felix Chinadu.
Yeah, Chinadu.
And this is a where is this little restaurant, or where is that?
That was from, so one of the big events that we put on, so we did a few major community events every year, and one of them was called Flower Power. And it coincided with the Anacostia River Festival.
Oh, okay.
And so
that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and it was an attempt to bring people up from the park up to the more residential part or the commercial part of Anacostia, and like to support the businesses that are there, like not just to go to the park and then go back home, like really to like experience what happens on this side of the river. And so that was from an Ikebana flower arranging workshop.
Oh, okay.
That was led by Keith Stanley.
Okay.
I knew I was gonna not remember names on the spot, but yeah.
You're doing good. You're doing great.
You can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is my breakout moment, I would call it, at least. The first exhibition that I did was called Not Too High, Not Too Low. The postcard on the left was designed by Eric Gordon. And so this exhibition invited comic book zine and comic book artists and illustrators to create new work for a gallery setting. So
that's nice. That's
rather than small and handheld, like what happens if we put it on a big wall? How do you blow up your work, or how do you change how it looks for a different audience in a different type of space?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and it was, I think, reflecting on it now, I think it was sort of trying to approach the elitism within the art world. I think I didn't, again, I don't know that I had the language for it at the time, but I found it really interesting that there was this amazing community of comic book artists in DC, but that they completely did not interact with the galleries that I went to. They seemed completely separate to me. And there's a lot of other subgroups that are like that. But this was just sort of, I met the artist Andrew Cohen, who designed this wacky illustration that you see on the pink paper.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked for a long time because he is the editor of Magic Bullet, which is a newspaper for comic book artists that he runs right now. And so he referred me to a few people. I did a lot of research and pulled together this show with 6 different artists. And the thing that you're seeing here is an exhibition zine that all the artists and myself contributed to, sort of pay homage to the medium that we were.
So this was on the wall of an.
This was something that was actually for sale. Eric Gordon used the equipment at Pyramid Atlantic, where the show was, to create these zines. So he screen printed all of, I forget how many. It was a lot.
That's smart. That's good.
Yeah.
I love that.
Right. And I really wanted that like interconnection between the space and the artist. So one of the things that I negotiated when I like pitched this exhibition was that all the artists would get memberships there so that they could use the services. Pyramid Atlantic is like it's an artist, like
right.
a maker space.
Right.
And so that they would be able to continue making their work in different ways, or trying to expand their work if they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to the next slide. So these photos are just a couple shots from the exhibition. This is an installation by Jess Aguero, who I think is incredible. So she had created, we have a lot of similar feelings about art spaces and museums. And I think she had this idea that she wanted it to feel warm and inviting and fun and silly and like not so serious as we often see galleries. And so she created this interactive installation that you were meant to interact with, but it's also like all these beautiful pieces to it. Like it can be both beautiful and technically strong, but also silly, and you can take a selfie and be goofy and hold up different signs. And I really love that idea.
That's nice. I do too.
A
very good idea something to take pictures in front of. That's great.
You're gonna do that anyway, might as well like make it intentional.
Yeah.
All right, you can go to the next slide, Patrick. Thank you. This is a image of Eric Gordon's piece. He had 2 pieces, or no, he had more than 2, but the sort of 2 major pieces that he had in this show were comic books that were made out of old record cases. And he painted on top of these record sleeves and had this like whole interesting narrative related to that. And you could flip it open and like interact with it. And yeah, I mean, it's like, how do you make the comic book bigger? You get a bigger page to work with. And so I loved the collage element of it and sort of the pop culture element of it too. And he's just a great storyteller. You can go to the next slide. This piece unfortunately did not come out well in photograph, but I did throw it in here anyway because this is Lenora Yerkes. She is an astounding storyteller and a beautiful illustrator. I strongly encourage people to look her up. And she has been working on a book about where she was from in Sacramento, California. And this was sort of this like interesting sort of like reality sort of blurring into like a sort of dreamscape about her life.
Is the original watercolor or? Yeah,
it's watercolor, which is why, I mean, it was on sort of the nude, like the beige paper is what it was on. So it's not totally washed out, but yeah, the color didn't. All right, we can go to the next slide. This is one of the artists was Tony Lane, who has been making zines for years and did not know until, I don't know, maybe say she didn't realize until more recently that she had been making zines. She didn't know there was a word for what she was making. And she has created all of these different stories that she has been working on for decades that she sort of continues to build on and elaborate. And so there were painted works of these characters, but she also had some of the original zines that were there that you could flip through. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so after that event, I pitched work and programs to a bunch of places, and basically 2018 was wild for me. I tried to I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't work at the art center anymore. Let me just try everything. And I did that, and I was very, very tired at the end of 2018. But before we get there, so one of the programs that I spent a long time working on also was called Sonic Infusion, and it was a lounge event. It was like a Sunday kickback. There was something about sort of like wanting to go out and be around people and like take in interesting things without it being like overstimulating. Like when you often go to a bar or a club or something on a Saturday night, you know, and it's buzzing. And like, could we replicate sort of like a more mellowed out, reflective space that you might have at home? Could we do that in a public setting? Like, so you can still be around people and take in something to carry through your week. But yeah, but you're around people. Anyway, so I organized this with DJ Cryptic. She's a local DJ who she's been in her name will come up in a lot of different things because I pull her in a lot, or I have pulled her in a lot. And so she obviously DJ'd that night, and we invited an artist and a tarot card reader, and it was in a now closed space.
Busboys is closed. Oh, I guess the pandemic. Yes.
No, actually, it was before that. They closed like right before. Okay. Yeah, it's still open in Philly. My uncle is actually the co-owner of that space, which is part of why I was like trying to take advantage of it as much as possible. But yeah, College Park is a rough place to run a business. So anyway, that's another story for another day. You can go to the next slide. So yeah, there's Cryptic and I don't know if she wants me to give her real name, so I'm not going to. But next slide. Okay, this was the tarot card reader. We put her in the green room so that she had sort of this like kind of quiet space, and kind of we spaced it out. We were just like tried to be really intentional about a lot of things, about the lighting, about the food, about the drinks that were available. Each part of it was like intentional to sort of create a mood. We can go to the next slide. This is the artist Shayma Cooper, another person who I've worked with numerous times. She was just in the holiday market that I did in December and November and December. And she was somebody I had an art crush on, and then like kind of sought her out and was like, I'm a huge fan. Do you want to be in an event that I'm doing?
I know how that is.
Yeah, well, it's just like sometimes you see somebody around and you're like, yeah, they're doing it. Like, right. It's just working for me. Right. So yeah, she created a custom print for this event that we gave out to free. Anyone who bought a ticket got one of these prints. And so yeah, that was like another just sort of like cool perk of showing up. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so after that, the next thing that happened was the Bodies exhibition that I put on at Otis Street Arts Project, which is a really special space that it's in a warehouse in Mount Rainier, and it hosts, I don't know how many artist studios exactly, but Dave Mardini runs it and has just like created a really really special community there. Like I just like they all really support each other in really wonderful ways, and like there's like a certain like personality almost of that space. And so it's not a traditional gallery, but he has curated different shows. And he and Sean Hennessy, who was the co-founder, who's no longer there, reached out to me and said, do you want to try to do a thing? And I was like, actually, I have this idea. And so this is the person that you're seeing right here is Daphna Steinberg, another artist that I've continued to work with and become close with.
This is the photographer?
Yeah. Yeah, she's a photographer
again.
She actually primarily focuses a lot on collage and found materials, but her like first art form was photography. And so this show actually was sort of a return for her to photography after not really doing much of it for a long time.
That's an important thought.
So this show was 3 artists who I wanted to make a show about bodies that are marginalized in the mainstream, like bodies that we just don't see enough, and that are othered because of that. So I was thinking just a lot about fat liberation. I was sort of like learning a lot more about that. I had just read a book by Lindy West, and I had also started reading bell hooks and like learning a lot more about feminism, and was also reading more about like queer theory and understanding different identities, and just was aware of like how limited what we see is on TV shows and movies and just online in general. So
superficial sometimes, very superficial.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think like part of the reason why we can be so self-critical is because we have a very narrow view of what is acceptable to look like. And, you know, we torture our bodies because they don't fit into this very narrow view. And I kind of wanted to throw that out. And, you know, I'm as a thin cis white woman, you know, I'm definitely not the first person to have this conversation, but it felt really important to at least try to highlight a few artists that were making work about this in this moment in DC. So you can go to the next slide. This is from one of the 3 artists, Ashley Janae. This was, I'm particularly proud of this part of the show because these were questions that she was posting on her Instagram, just as like an open like forum, basically. Her work is about Black women, Black women's bodies and hair, and they're often like, I mean, her work is evolving right now, but at the time her work was figures on, often like figures, Black women, often sometimes with plants, but on white paper. And they are really striking works and intense to look at because they're so like stark between the Black and the white. And they, I guess like a tie-in to what she was sort of trying to explore was these questions of like, what is it like to take up space? And particularly as a Black woman, and particularly as somebody who's not defined as thin. And so this was an interactive part. So basically I was like, I love that thing that you're doing on Instagram. Can we do it in the gallery? And so I forget if she sent me the questions or if I selected from things she had already posted, but We came up with a few questions and left out some Post-it notes and markers. And, you know, again, like I know that's something that's sort of, I think a lot of different projects try to do this, like get people involved. But I think what felt different about it was that these were questions that you really kind of had to be quiet with for a minute. Like the other one was like, who told you, or who allowed you to take up space? What makes you feel seen?
I think the whole idea about, conversations about bodies and Black bodies and aesthetics and political statements. And I think that, things are and the space that they're in. I think that on TV, in the newspapers, I think that we really don't spend the time understanding the multiple layers, the multi-dimensions that are and then I guess I was also, and I'm not going to really try to go into this in a great amount of detail, but I was looking at the whole idea of the Black body in the Coming to America too. Looking at women and looking at African and all the multiple stories. And I know it's fun, it's a romp, but at the same time, there are these multiple spaces, places, aesthetics, politics, so much, and as you say, we need more. We go beyond the superficial and to be, so.
Yeah. No, I think we don't realize how much it affects us.
Exactly.
To not see, not just ourselves, but like a variety of bodies. Like, I think that, you think about like the example of like a kid on the street staring at someone in a wheelchair.
Right.
Well, it might be because they've never seen somebody in a wheelchair ever in their life,
Right.
like that wouldn't be so jarring, or it wouldn't be such like an uncomfortable exchange if that had been sort of normalized for them earlier on.
Right.
And I think that like a lot of issues, there's a lot of ways in which these issues need to be addressed, and policy is definitely part of that. But I think like something that we can do just as like citizens on like a simple level is just like on our own, exposing ourselves to bodies that don't look like ours in a variety of ways, and not sort of the in straight-haired, cisgendered, all these other things, often white, or at least light-skinned. Yeah. All right. So we can go to the next slide. I'm aware of the fact that
I know I was going down the road.
I know I can talk at length. I was so worried I wasn't going to fill up 30 minutes, but here we are. So this is Matt Storm's work. He's an incredible photographer. He does self-portraiture. He is a trans man, and he explores that a lot. And it's like the primary thing that he explores in his work. And a lot of his work is self-portraiture. Yeah, so this was a series that he did, sort of testing the limits of his body, that were just like aside from the subject matter, were just like beautiful compositions, beautiful shots. Like he's just a really really thoughtful photographer.
They look really interesting. They look very very compelling.
Yeah, I definitely I sort of met him by accident at a I went to an interview for a group house, and it happened to come up that I was in the arts, and one of his housemates at the time was like, "Oh, Matt's a photographer," and he gave me his card, and we met up for coffee, and I was like, "Oh yeah." It was like another sort of thing of like, "Oh, I like what you're doing. I want more of it. Like, how can we work together?" And it wasn't much longer, it's only a few months later that I sort of started to put together the idea for this exhibition. And right away I was like, Matt, you need to be in this.
Right. It's essentially how hookups happen. Certain kind of hookups.
All right, you can go to the next slide. I could talk about this work for a long time, but it is embroidery work of basically dick pics. The artist didn't want to be named because he's an educator and he used a pseudonym, which of course I cannot think of right now. Oh, Hard Stitch. There we go. Hard Stitch was the pseudonym he was using. Again, really interesting, stunning works. I love to see people's reaction to them because it was like one of the first things you would see when you walked into the space.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And how people would react to these men parts versus the normalcy of seeing women parts, right?
Well, I think also seeing, like, I think there's a really interesting juxtaposition between these sort of very kind of like, I would say some of them, not all of them, but some of them are like very aggressive photos in terms of like, I mean, you just see a penis like just like right in the center of the frame, which is not normally how you, what you would expect to see in a gallery. But they're embroidered. And embroidery is this slow, like sort of detail-oriented work. It's often considered women's work. And so to sort of like put that type of imagery on embroidery, I thought was just like a really, really made you think in interesting ways. So like the images on their own are really interesting and compelling, but they're amplified by the medium that he chose.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this was from the closing show. So as part of the closing for that exhibition, I invited performer, poet, arts event organizer Harvey Fitz, who had been putting together monthly series and at the Art Center, which is like how I knew him. He had been organizing them there. And I said, you know a lot of poets and people, like different people than people that I know. Could you organize one of your events as part of this exhibition? And so for the closing of the exhibition, we had a selection of spoken word poets and performers that focused around bodies and what it's like to live in their particular body. And I would love to think more about that within the future. It was like it was really fun for me because I kind of gave him the floor for the night and just sort of was like, do it, like we got the space, do what you want to do in it. And he put together a really interesting selection of musicians and poets, and it was a really cool night. Yeah.
Now, did we say where this was?
This is at Otis Street Arts Project.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yes.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
in Mount Rainier.
All right, good. So I was still trying to, okay.
Yeah, no, well, it looks different. So this is in a different part of the space. Like there's sort of a back area that is just a couple of studio spaces. And then there's this sort of like area where they've had a lot of artist talks and other programming. And so we were able to use that space for performance. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, that's just me there. I was there. I did show up at my own event. We can go to the next slide. Okay. So this was the last thing that I did in 2018. And definitely is related to a lot of where my head still is now. So basically, long story short is I didn't sell a lot of art in 2018. I did a lot of events. I did not sell very much art. And I was kind of confused. Like I had already worked in an art space and knew that art was sometimes hard to sell. And it was hard to find the market for it in DC. But I loved all of this work so much. And I just could not figure out how to get the money part. I was like, I've figured out I can find artists, I can think about interesting ideas, but at the end of the day, that doesn't matter as much if artists aren't being paid for their labor. if I'm not being paid for my labor,
Mm-hmm.
and if the broader DC is not connecting with the artists. If it's just artists supporting other artists in this loophole, like we're not accomplishing, or I wasn't accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish. You know, like the body show is best if there is somebody who doesn't normally look at art show up in that space.
Right.
Reach them.
Right. I'm wondering, because I know you've got quite a few more slides. I'm wondering if we ought to just show slides every couple of minutes, or,
Yeah.
so that we can kind of get through. Because I know there are questions. There are questions people may have.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I'll just go through this kind of more quickly. But basically,
it's good information. But
this event in a nutshell is an art lottery. It was attempting to both get artists to be able to sell work at affordable prices and to make art buying sexy to people who didn't think that they could be art collectors. Yeah, and it was, again, like just sort of like a fun event. So the work was either priced at $29, $49, or $79, and you could sort of pick your price point, and then there was a selection of works within that.
And let me stop right there, but I mean, we're gonna continue on. But I had a question, because I was talking earlier to a group of people, and they were saying, how do we get younger people to begin to collect? There's a number of people in the community, the older collectors. I guess it's about wealth, having wealth, and or expendable income. And then I was explaining, well, there are younger people, but it's taking maybe a little more time, for them to come around. What, in terms of how did this go over in terms of the working with younger collectors, or encouraging? What are your suggestions about how to encourage younger collectors?
I mean, I think I haven't totally solved it. I'm still thinking about it. Right now I'm reading this book called The Art of Relevance, because I'm trying to figure out that a bit. And this worked, but partially because it was like I had friends who were not involved in the arts community who I was able to pull in, and all of them really loved this experience. But like I wanted to think bigger. I think part of it was encouraging artists to make and sell work at a variety of price points. I think it's important for you to make your work, that your painting that's $2,000. I do think there are people that will buy that, but you also need to have a piece that is $75, because somebody might love your work and want to support you, but you got to meet them where they are. And so I think that's part of it. And I think a lot of artists, are trying to do that right now. I think especially like with Instagram and things, like I see a lot of artists selling different types of products and trying to sort of use their skills in different ways. But yeah, I don't know. I was trying to think of ways to make it fun, and the lottery idea was what I came up with. And I honestly would consider like trying to redo this event, because I think I was close, or I think I was getting there. I just I don't know. I needed more time, I think. All right, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of breeze through this, because this is not technically my event. It's just something I spent a long time with.
But what I also, creative economy, a catalyst, creating opportunities. I'm just kind of referencing these with that. Kind of explain that a little bit more to me about in terms of these projects.
Am
I making sense to you? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm thinking a little bit of like the questions that you gave me.
I know. Let's do how the satisfaction, the satisfaction that you're getting out of creating. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
That and the artist satisfaction. Let's connect those.
Yeah. Well, I think so. Like I said, I kind of went into 2018 kind of just like a trying and doing everything. And after that year, and kind of in the 2 years since then, I have been trying to figure out what else it is that I want to do, because I loved creating the first 2 exhibitions that I talked about, Bodies and Not Too High, Not Too Low. I loved making them, but I didn't feel like it was enough, because like I said, I wanted more people to see it, and I wanted the artists to walk away with more. Like, I was able to manufacture things for them, but that I am one human and I don't have that much power in the world. And so, I used what I had to support them, but I feel like it's most successful in communication with a larger community.
Right.
In conversation with a larger community. And like I said, like, artists can make beautiful work all day, but if they want to be full-time artists, they need to find ways to connect their work with collectors. And I wasn't successful in doing that, or not as successful as I had hoped I would be. And it also just made me realize that artists also can't create work if they don't have like a safe and stable foundation to start from. Right. So, and I definitely knew artists that were like, running on empty because they were working a bunch of jobs so that they could try to make their work in their downtime.
So in my mind, I'm seeing this as a catalyst. I'm seeing you as this pioneer that sees these opportunities that's or affiliated with these different spaces, but sees the opportunity to fill in, and that you see all these creative folk, the e-zines, the idea of the body, how do we see bodies differently, and connecting them, and then doing these exhibitions, and then community, connecting, developing, or trying to develop a community. That's it. Try to develop a community that supports it. So the sustainability,
Right. And I think early on I've kind of dropped this recently, but my social handles are still Amy Lokoff. Because I think when I started, I felt like I wanted to create a community around like this personality or something like that. Like, I felt like that maybe would be the thing. And I'm less attracted to that now. Like, I'm lucky that I've been able to connect with. I have a list of 200 artists that I can email at any given time.
That's a blessing.
Yeah, and I've worked at building that, but I, that doesn't. There's only so much that I can do for them or that they can do for me. And so what I realized is I need to sort of think about money and policy as the things if I want to influence things. Those are the things that need to sort of come first in my mind. Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, you wanted to tell us about this piece.
I will. Yeah, like I said, I'll skim over this a bit, but it was really influential to me. This is a work called Rapture that's by the artist and activist Monica Yahan-Bose. She's a DC-based artist who I worked with for over a year, making this piece. A lot of her work is performance, and some of her work is visual art. And basically, this piece was sort of about connecting where she is from in Bangladesh, where her family is from in Bangladesh, with Anacostia, and creating community around climate change, addressing climate change. Like, both communities are places that are along the water. There's actually the shad fish is like in both areas, like coincidentally. And the people in the village in Bangladesh where she's from are already, I think everyone is experiencing the effects of climate change, but they were experiencing it in like really devastating ways. And so she was trying to sort of create conversation around us as individuals, and sort of like starting sort of this advocacy in individuals.
I'm looking at this fabric, and I know that really. How long was the fabric up? Because I know that really brought people in. It caught their eye.
Yeah. So these are a collection of, these are all saris that are worn in Bangladesh. Some of them are actually ones that were worn by the artist or worn in the village where she's from. Some of them were printed there, some of them, and a lot of them, the sort of thing that I was working on with her for the year, she got a public art grant to be able to put this whole thing together. But we had community workshops that went for about 8 months, I would say. A lot of them were in Anacostia, but we had some in Adams Morgan. There was a few downtown. And basically it was like this opportunity to educate people about climate change, about, you know, where she's from, and together making these saris.
Do you have a couple more pictures of her? Because I know because I know we're about in the
Oh
time.
man, yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm long.
Oh, that's okay. Yes, that's
yeah. So that's from one of the workshops. You can go to the next slide. This was again like at the end of a workshop. We were sort of showing it off. Next slide. Oh, there's me and Monica at one of the. We basically hung this installation 3 different times, and it could only be up for the day because we didn't want them. They're not weather resistant. Okay, go to the next slide.
Who have been some of your influences, Amy?
Well, okay. Well, since we just talked about Monica, I will say the way in which Monica thinks about things has been really influential to me. We paid people to participate in those workshops. I loved that because so often, you know, we ask people for their time, and while they're getting something out of it, especially if, like, it depends on who you're inviting and who has the ability to just give you an hour of their time. And if it's somebody who's lower income, that hour matters a lot. If they're not somebody who's salaried, that hour matters a lot. And so through the grant, we were able to pay people to help us make this project. And so it felt like this really thinking about multiple ways to impact the community in making art. Like that we want to be lifting up the community, not just by giving them a pretty thing, but also like giving back to the community. Like we essentially gave people like a temporary job to help us make something that their community would get to appreciate and experience.
So this is the last project. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, I think that's really, that part is really important to me.
Right.
Yeah, this is the most recent thing that I did.
We're going to do this very quickly.
Yeah, I mean,
the next slide.
It's a holiday market. I did it with, this is my collaborator, Emma Surikit-Kosen. And she's a fantastic artist. These are 2 of her works. You can go to the next slide. This was, so the first event that we tried to do was last March, almost exactly a year ago. It was canceled because of the pandemic. But she was the one who really pushed me to make this event happen. It basically was like getting artists to sell their older works. Again, like trying to bring in new collectors and selling everything under $100. And also helping the artists by allowing them to have the ability to clear out their spaces, sell work that was no longer relevant to what they were doing currently, or it was a test run, or, you know, artists collect things. So anyway, so here's from the holiday market. You said in the beginning, it was over 40 artists and makers that participated. It was a huge success to be able to do this during a pandemic. Hundreds of people came out. Everyone was masked and safe. We had hand sanitizer everywhere. And yeah, I'm really proud of it. It was really great because after a year of spending most of my time in my house, I got to be around artists again and get to be around just out around people in general. That was.
I know it is. It's almost that time again to be outside, and
Yeah,
with all these
it was
vaccinations.
cold. This was cold.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, like, these are from the nice days. It was very cold and very windy, but a lot of the artists really, really benefited after, a lot of the holiday markets this year were canceled. And so the ability to be able to participate in this was like a complete game changer for a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. So as we begin to close this, who are the question that we always ask? Andy always asks, and he says, if there were 3 people that you could invite to dinner or to your studio or to a project, who would they be?
I found this one real hard, really hard. But okay, what I came up with is Frederick Douglass, Bell Hooks, and Marsha P. Johnson. And I picked those 3 people because they're not necessarily all artists, but they are all people who saw something before the rest of people in their time saw it. Like, saw a vision for the future of like what was possible and what needed to happen, and spoke to it, even though it was incredibly controversial in those times. I mean, Bell Hooks is still around, but reading her older works, she's talking about stuff that we are struggling with in 2021. Yeah, I think.
Yes, we can take a few of the audience's questions.
Okay.
I see there's a question. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What are you curating? Can you see that in the bottom?
Yeah. What are you curating in the area now? So right now so in terms of basically right now, I have just gotten into grad school. I'm very happy about it, and to study policy because I want to study cultural policy so that I can do the things. But in the meantime, while I'm waiting to go, I am trying to reboot that spring cleaning event that was canceled last year. I think that it's a really cool event. I think gets people interacting with artists, and it gets artists interacting with potential new collectors. So we're talking to Emmett and I are doing it together again, and we're talking to a venue right now. But hey, if anybody on here knows a venue in DC that wants to host us, hit me up, because it's still tricky. We're still in a pandemic. It still needs to be outside. And
that's a nice idea. It's a very nice idea.
So yeah.
Is that the only question? Are there any other questions? Oh,
marketing. What marketing strategies do you use to get the general public to your events? Kind of speaking to what I was saying earlier, is like I'm still grappling with that. I think one of the most important things to me has been like local news, local newsletters, like finding the smaller blogs or influencers in DC, and getting them to shout out your event. And which is why you have to be involved in the community, because you need to get the trust of those people, and for them to want to talk about what you're doing. So I think one of my favorite things is 730 DC. It's a daily newsletter. A lot of people in DC read it, but it's just was started by a group of like young adults in their 20s in DC, and they're really real about like they share the news, but then they also share a lot of like what's happening culturally. So. Oh man, long one. Okay. How can I find a space in or around DC for a female and female identifying empowerment installation?
Hi, Leah.
I knew the last person, but I don't know this one. I show in multiple galleries around DC and would love to produce an installation piece. I think that DC doesn't have enough art spaces, first of all. And so I think that something that's so important is kind of this, like the cold email, just dropping on just sending someone an email and trying them out, I think has been really important during my like process of like just going around DC and just trying to find a space that is not necessarily art specific, because we are, unfortunately, we just don't have enough of those spaces right now. And so you need to get a little bit creative sometimes, because the few spaces that are available are spread thin and don't have enough time and money. And so you can find people to fund your events and do it in outside spaces or more DIY spaces. I think that that's a starting point. You know, I think it's something, again, like.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for their questions. Those were good questions.
Yeah, they were all really good ones.
And we have the information below how you can contact Amy. And for more information or to keep up with what she's doing. So I'm really interested in finding out what you're doing in grad school. Because I'm sure.
I mean, it's gonna be different. I'm used to being around artists all the time, so it's gonna be different. But you know, I'm hoping that this will help me on my sort of journey to trying to figure out how to bring culture to or help lift up culture in communities and help lift up artists.
My cat has decided she wants to be a part of this.
Oh, I'm for it.
Well, I want to again thank everyone, and thank you all very much for watching us or being with us tonight. I found, I really love your passion, Amy. I really love how you are fearless in pursuing diverse audiences and artists. And I think that I'm looking forward to what you continue to do. And hopefully at some point we can do some things together. I'd really love to be able to do some things together, Amy.
Yeah, I would love that. I think the idea of putting art in Busboys and Poets is like just so perfect. Like, talk about ways to reach just like the general public.
It's perfect. It's perfect. And as I say, I just, maybe we can find some funding so we can be able to do, so it's all good. So again, thank you so much. I loved your ideas. I loved your work. And I look forward to our next steps. All right.
Yeah. And thank you so much for inviting me. This was
absolutely.
And to be able to talk about all the things I've done.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. And for the all the you that are watching, all these good folks that are watching, we'll be back in 2 weeks and having another conversation on Art on the Line, exploring the arts community, see what's all around and how we can share information to uplift and empower artists and the community. Thank you very much and have a great evening and enjoy this weather. Get your vaccine. For those of you that want, take care and be healthy. Good night. Good night.